Hi, my name is Prumihimo, and today I'd like to show you how to make a beautiful braid on the square plate or square disc using a great chunky braid structure and adding beads. Now, I have already produced a video showing how to make this particular chunky braid structure, so I do advise watching that. But I will give a quick recap on what it's all about, and then I will carry on to explain how you add beads to your braid. So, as I've already said, this braid is going to be made on the square plate or disc. And it's a chunky structure because it differs from other braids in how many times a cord passes across the middle of the braid, the disc, in between each sequence of top to bottom moves. And a lot of braids, you will do your top to bottom moves, and then you put one cord across and then do another sequence of top to bottom moves, and that will give you quite a thin braid. There are other braids where instead of just one crossover with the cord, you'll have two cords crossing over, and that gives you a slightly thicker braid. Now this one has three cords crossing over, so that gives you a much chunkier braid, and the advantage of that is that I think it's easier to maintain the tension. I think it's a very pretty design, and it's nice and firm, so it's very good for supporting beads, particularly larger beads along the sides. Now, for this braid, when you're adding beads, I'm going to make some recommendations on materials. You can experiment with different materials, but I'm going to suggest as a starting point that the cord you use is satin cord. It's also known as rat tail, 1 millimeter diameter. And the reason for that is that will give you a nice structure to your braid. I'm then going to suggest that the beads you use are size 6 beads, and that they're preferably a brand like Miyuki, which I find has quite a large hole in the middle. And with your cords, you'll need to stiffen them with something like super glue or clear nail varnish or something, just so that they're stiff, and you should then be able to get them through those beads. So those are my 3 recommendations as a starting point. But once you've got the technique right, you can play with other ideas. So without further ado, let's have a close-up look at the actual braids. So here we have a close-up of 2 chunky flat braids with beaded edges. Now this one on the top, this blue and white one, I have used size 6 Miyuki beads, as I explained earlier. And this braid is 12 cords wide. The one below here, this is 10 cords wide, and I have used, in fact, Miyuki triangles, which also have a nice big hole. You can also use Miyuki squares. But if you might find that some other brands, the hole is a little bit tight for you to get your cord through. So this is your setup. Now, I do advise watching my previous video about how to make a chunky braid on its own, because I go through quite a lot of tension tips on that. I'm going to concentrate now more on the actual beading than on the movements, but I will just run through the movements once as we add on the beads. So the setup is 5 cords along the top, 4 along the bottom, and 1 at the side. And you start on the top with slot 3 and go across to slot 7. You start on the bottom with slot 13 and across to 16. The movements start, as with the plain braid, with your cord on the right hand top. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the top down, bottom up movements, and then I'll show you how to add the beads. So the top down movements are top down, and then pick up the next cord and bring it up to that empty slot. Pick up the very next cord and bring it down to the empty slot. Again, moving right to left, pick up the next cord into the empty slot. Pick up the next cord into the empty slot. Pick up the next cord into the empty slot. Pick up the next cord into the empty slot. And finally, with the bottom one, pick up the empty cord and into the next slot. You're not going to move that one just yet. So you've now done the top and bottom moves. Now we're going to add the beads. So the first cord that we're going to add the beads in, and because the cords move round on a flat braid like this, you need to put a few beads on each cord because they will each take their turn at carrying the beads. So I'm going to do my move, which is the side cord down to 13, but when I do that I'm going to drop in a bead. So I'm going to just squish it there with my finger and bring it across, and I just need to make sure that it doesn't jump over any of those cords. The next move is the top left, and I'm going to bring that over to the empty slot here on the side, and I'm going to drop in a bead now as well. So the same thing, I'm going to drop it in, slide it down the cord and just squish it into position and make sure that it doesn't jump over any of those cords. And if necessary, I can just push them down. Now, the third move is to take the cord on the bottom right and bring it up and across and put it into slot 3. Now, when you do this, you need to keep a very careful eye on those beads because they can jump out of position. So I'm going to pull it up, and I pull it up, so I'm pulling the whole braid back up to the top of that rectangular hole in the disc and across. And now you will see my cords are back in the correct positions, or the starting positions. 5 across the top from 3 to 7, 4 across the bottom from 13 to 16, and 1 at the side. I'm now going to go through it all again. Top to bottom, bottom to top, top to bottom, bottom to top, top to bottom, bottom to top, top to bottom, bottom to top. Now I'm going to just do a complete sequence without beads, just to give a bit more space in between the beads. So I'm going to do those other moves, the crossover moves, without beads. So it's the side down to the bottom left, top right, across to the side, bottom right, pull up and across. And you're back in the starting positions. So now you can continue and do another sequence. And on this sequence, don't forget to drop in your beads on this cord when it moves from the side down to the vacated slot 13, and on this cord when you bring it across to the side. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, I'd like to recommend that you look at some of my other videos for flat braids, because I have several other ones, both using beads and without beads. And what I always try to do, as I have in this one, is share my tips for success. So if you found that this was easier than you expected because of the sort of advice I'm giving, then you're bound to find my other videos on flat braids really useful. So just search for them on my YouTube channel, Prumihimo flat braid, a whole load will come up. I hope you'll enjoy them. And I hope also you'll visit my website, the Prumihimo.com website, where you'll find all sorts of lovely things like my books and my disc, and lots of other advice and resources, and a great blog as well. So until next time, bye-bye.